The Master of Disguise by Antonio J. Mendez. This is an interesting book in my library of the CIA's uh, disguise, head of disguises or makeup, or I'm not, as someone who uh, dabbles a little bit in the uh, effects world. Um, I found this to be interesting. I picked this up at a used bookstore, and I was not disappointed. This basically covers the life of the CIA head makeup artist, disguise artist. I'm not sure exactly what you would call it, but Master of Disguise is definitely a fitting title. But he obviously, now this is told, this is obviously an agency approved book. So, as it says here, for the first time ever, the CIA has authorized a top level operative to tell all. Tell some is probably more accurate. This came out in 1999, I believe. Yes, published in 1999, and this edition is from 2000. Um, Lots of interesting anecdotes about uh, disguises and how he came up with stuff, and a lot of what was considered cutting edge back in the day. But it's it's a little frustrating in that it's very short on details. Like as someone that's curious about the materials involved in this sort of thing, I was a little disappointed that he hints at certain things, but uh, stops short of really connecting with giving you a lot of the information. One thing I did find really interesting in this was he does talk, gives more information than I expected about a helicopter that was used for covert operations in Vietnam, sometimes referred to as the Quiet One, and gives some of the inside scoop on what made it so quiet, like adding extra rotors to the main rotor, extra blades to the main rotor, um, cutting down on the pop 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 sound of only having two rotors like the Hueys and such. So there's some interesting stuff about that because that particular aircraft, the Hughes 500, or I think it's just called typically the 500 or the Quiet One. Um, I suspect that helicopter was probably involved in a lot of the early cattle mutilations here in the United States. Um, can't prove that, but that's just kind of a working hypothesis I have. And I think that some of the original cattle mutilations might have actually been a byproduct of testing of some of those covert operatives and their skill level by doing some of those things. Don't know. That's something for uh, another time. But Master of Disguise is a very, very interesting book. Like I said, this is kind of the shallow end of the pool because he, again, obviously it's an agency approved book. He doesn't really get into deep operational material. But there is some very interesting things here. He hints at some of the masks that they had come up with, a technique they had come up with where they could put something on their face and immediately look totally different. And talks about testing this, but he never really goes into what exactly this method was. And interesting aside, I'm not going to mention the gentleman's name because I don't want him getting snared up in any of this type of thing. But I had the occasion of having dinner with uh, a, a gentleman that was very high up in the Hollywood makeup world, and we were talking about some of this. And I asked him about if he knew what this guy was talking about in his book, and he talked about John Chambers had worked with them. The makeup artist John Chambers in Hollywood had worked with the CIA extensively, and the CIA guys at one point had brought over to him, showed him what they had done on their own, and then John Chambers, of course, helped take it farther. But what they had done, and he suspected this is what he's referring to in this book, was they had taken vacuum formed plastic, like clear or translucent plastic, like face masks, like you have for children's masks, and they had carefully airbrushed all these details into this. On both the in and outside. So it had this layered paint job, And he said when you looked at this, and he said he saw one of these in person, and he said when he looked at this sitting on a workbench, it just looked like a mess. It didn't make any sense at all. But he said as soon as you put it on, all of the colors and lines and freckles and everything, that plus the color of your own skin added up to create this very impressive illusion that you were looking at a totally different person. And he said, yeah, from a few feet away, it was, it was very convincing. He said the downside, though, because this was made of vacuum formed plastic, this wouldn't move with someone's face. So it was not as convincing as maybe it could have been, but it was very effective as far as just being able to put on and walk out into a street and not look like the original guy. Um, so anyway, fascinating stuff on this, and it's interesting. I've talked to several people in the kind of on the inside, AFOSI people and stuff like that, that all hold this guy in high regard as kind of a hero of modern disguise techniques. So really fascinating stuff there. But again, it does fall a little bit short. I think he has since passed away. It would have been neat to. I doubt any book like this will ever get published, but it would have been interesting to see what kind of book this would have been if it had been written without agency permission and he had just, spilled it all out there. But I would love to see how modern silicone technology and some of that played into some of their techniques. So anyway, Master of Disguise by Antonio J. Mendez. Great book. And like I said, there's a lot of interesting little covert operation details sprinkled throughout if you're willing to sift through it. Definitely, again, the shallower end of the covert ops pool, but still some valuable information.